Skip the waiting room. TireRack.com now offers convenient mobile tire installation in select areas. Simply shop TireRack.com for your next set of tires, and at checkout, choose Tire Rack Mobile Tire Installation. An expertly trained technician will arrive with your tires and install them on site, at home, at the office, wherever you are. You'll spend less time waiting and more time doing the things you enjoy. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to the third edition of the FunBelt podcast. I'm Ben Moore. I'm taking the lead tonight in a stormy night here in Metro Atlanta. So I am joined by the fabulous, as always, Dusty Thibodeau. Dusty.
I don't know what I did that was fabulous, but thank you. And I'm glad that we didn't get canceled after calling Dion. And also, no one from Lafayette has showed up at my house yet for calling them Lafayette.
It's early. It's only 3 episodes in. And, of course, the fabulous Jeremy Harper as well. What's going on, Jeremy? How you doing, man?
Doing very well. Glad to be back on. Trying not to create a turmoil or controversy tonight.
We got some guests this episode, fellas. That's exciting. Our podcast gets a little bigger and stronger and smarter. We've learned real quick. We got Doug Konkel of the fabulous 24/7 Sports Network of Jags Jungle, as well as Creq Stephenson, who covers South Alabama. So it's going to be a South Alabama heavy podcast show this evening. So just to let you know there's a lot going on down there in lower Alabama, LA, as we call it over here in Georgia. So thanks to Doug and Creq for joining us. And I guess we'll start with Doug and go from there. New coach. A lot of excitement down there in South Alabama, brand new digs, brand new facilities. What has Coach Kane brought so far to Mobile and in basically his first few months?
Well, first off, fellas, there are a few seminal moments in a man's life. I mean, he's born. He graduates high school and college. He finds a woman. He marries her. He has children. These are great things. But they don't really peak until they make the Sunbelt podcast. So thank you so much for bringing me on. And really, you've completed my life. And at this point, it's all downhill, but tonight is going to be great. To answer your question, Kane Womack, 33 years old, youngest FBS coach in FBS football. I guess that makes sense. And I tell you what, guys, he's exactly what you would expect from the youngest football coach in FBS football. He is young, energetic, magnetic. There are pictures of him wrestling a linebacker, Riley Cole, in a hotel room the night before the draft as they're waiting to see if he's going to get picked or not. He's just he's won over the community, certainly run over the roster. And from the few players I've talked to, holdovers and new guys who joined the team, they said that the feeling around the program and the enthusiasm on the team is unmatched in any of their tenures they've been there.
Well, I know there's a lot of expectations now, obviously, on a coach that has been there before in Mobile. We know about the Steve Campbell era not going so great, but bringing back someone basically from the Big Ten and coming from a school, honestly, that had a great defense. And you mentioned the roster as well. We were talking about it a little bit off air. The amount of transfers is mind-boggling. So the coaching staff has certainly mined the transfer portal well. And what's the number as of today? I haven't checked the latest on how many transfers have come down to found their way to Mobile.
Now Craig will have a different number for you, but the number I'm at is 15. I got us at 15 transfers that are coming in, and that's not counting one guy who is a walk-on. He was a walk-on at Tennessee, and he's walking on at South Alabama. Not counting him. There are 3 guys, probably 2 guys who are walk-ons. That's going to be punter Jack Martin coming in from Alabama and kicker Barrett Pickering from Nebraska. But everybody else is scholarship, and all are expected to contribute, and many will be starters.
You know, Craig had had reported on a couple guys that had just come in. You said everybody's going to contribute in some way. Two of those guys are Antanza Vonger from TCU and Keyshawn Brown from Texas A&M. Are those guys going to be instant contributors, or do we know enough about those guys to even know?
Well, I can tell you in terms of Brown, who's a linebacker, South Alabama feels they're already really set at linebacker with A.J. DeShazer and Quentin Wilfon, and they got pretty good depth there too. They think Brown's going to come in and provide depth there, play special teams for him to begin with. He's a 4-for-4 guy, though, and he's going to be playing behind there's several guys in that rotation who are 6-year seniors or 5th-year seniors. So he'll get a chance to start going forward. I don't think he'll start this year. Now, Vonger comes in at safety. And I don't want to get you bogged down too much in the weeds here, but Kane Womack's defense, the Swarm D, that is basically developed from the defense his father, Dave Womack, ran, which I know you Arkansas State guys remember Dave Womack. He's one of the well-traveled defensive coordinators in college football in the last 2 or 3 decades. This defense asks a lot of safeties. It's very safety-centric. It's why Jeremy Reeves was a defensive player of the year back when Kane Womack was a defensive coordinator at South Alabama. They play what's called a vision defense, which is basically the safeties run to a predetermined spot, turn, look at the quarterback, and then react accordingly according to what they're seeing. So safeties are a big deal. Smart safeties, experienced safeties are especially helpful. So Vonger's going to get a chance to come in and contribute right away, perhaps break in the starting rotation. But they got quite a few bodies there now, so we'll see if he manages to be the guy who comes out on top.
So shifting gears, though, on the offensive side, to me, the big name that really caught my attention, Jake Bentley, transfer from South Carolina and Utah. This guy's like a phenomenal quarterback there, 8,400 yards, passing 9th currently in the NCAA, probably going to wind up in the top 5. What's the backstory there, Craig, if you want to jump in on that and just kind of tell us, how did he wind up in good old Lower Alabama and the Jags?
Yeah, well, he played up to his junior year of high school in the state of Alabama at Opelika High School. His dad,
Opelika, by the way.
Yeah, his dad, Bobby, who was a longtime South Carolina high school football coach, got a job on Gus Malzahn's staff. So he was in Alabama, familiar with the state. He actually had an older brother at one time who was at Troy. I don't think he's there anymore, was on the football staff there. But anyway, it basically comes down to Major Applewhite, I think. There's some connection there. And the idea of just, looking for a place to play in a place he's familiar with, and Major Applewhite being a big name, a big draw in terms of working with quarterbacks. It's almost like, as soon as they got the job, Jake Bentley was one of the guys they started looking at. And as you mentioned, I've seen some of the transfer lists around the country, and he's not rated very high, which really seems odd to me when you talk about a guy who threw for 7,500 yards in the SEC. I mean, I at the Sun Belt level, I think that if you have a difference maker at quarterback, you can win. I don't think you can win if you don't have one. And he seems to me like he can be that guy. Now, he's only a 1-year guy. Obviously, it's not some guy you can build the program around for the next 3 or 4 years like some of the other transfers. Doug mentioned there are a few that actually have 3 and 4 years left. But considering what South Alabama has at receiver, I don't see any way, if he stays healthy, he doesn't come in and have a big year.
Craig, you mentioned receiver, and there is a guy on the receiving core of South Alabama that haunts my every waking moment. He put up 3 TDs and 250 yards last year on the Red Wolves. Jalen Tolbert. Is Bentley going to make him even better, or is it possible that he can get any better?
Well, hold on a second. He had 4 touchdowns the year before that. Let's not forget that game.
I wanted to forget.
It's possible. And, I think one of the biggest recruiting wins of the offseason, as well as they've been doing, bringing guys in, I think another big win was keeping Jalen Tolbert in Mobile, because there were programs coming after him in this state in particular. And I think, it was pointed out to me that, South Alabama essentially is running Alabama's offense. And maybe if Alabama had realized that, they'd have taken a real shot at bringing Jalen Tolbert in. But, he's really, really good. Obviously, has been a contributor since day one, would have played as a true freshman, but got hurt in a preseason scrimmage. So that gave him what is amounted to an extra year. And There's some other talent at receiver as well. Jalen Wayne, a guy who has been a contributor. Cade Sutherland is another. Colin Lacey's a young guy they really like. And then they brought in Alan Daly, who was a starter at Kentucky last year. I mean, Kentucky's not known as a great throw the ball down the field team, but if you can start in the SEC, you can certainly play well in the Sun Belt. So I think they're going to have some weapons. At least in the passing game, running back is a something they got to get sorted out. And obviously offensive line has been a real issue for this team for as long as I've been covering them, which goes back to 2015. But they do like the talent they have there. They brought in a bunch of guys that probably at least 3 of the 5 that they brought in are going to be, I would say, instant starters.
The Jags last year really struggled, though, kind of mixing it up and getting that running game going. I mean, they were horrible on the ground. I mean, 2.9 yards of carry, and then their leading rusher, as if that wasn't bad enough, already hit the portal. I didn't really see where he had landed anywhere. Carlos Davis. Well,
he's got some legal issues to sort out before he goes somewhere, I think.
Everybody got some stank.
Not as good as his stank. His stank is real good.
Oh,
another guy too. Dwayne Betts is another guy got some legal issues to work out.
And I think. Sorry, Doug. I think that's a big part of Vongor. With Betts being gone, Vongor is going to have a real chance to contribute, and may be the reason they got Vongor. To be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you guys, but South Alabama kind of opened their stadium last year. Hancock Whitney moved out of one of my favorite stadiums of all time, Ladd Peoples. I know some people think I kid about that, but I love Ladd Peoples. Now you've got this brand new stadium, state of the art. You played last year, but it didn't quite feel right. Is now playing before home crowds? Is it feel more like this is the christening year for Hancock Whitney?
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a soft open last year. They weren't able to get the students involved, weren't able to have the pregame ceremonies, and weren't able to have the, let's bring the booster down and give them, have them present the check at halftime, or let's bring the softball or baseball team onto the field and honor them. And we weren't able to do any of that stuff. And you had, a little bit of a crowd experience, especially early in the year when they were playing well. That Tulane game, even though it was only 6,500 people there, was a really nice atmosphere. They had the Senior Bowl there. They were able to, get the crowd involved there. The spring game, it was terrible weather, and then it got cut short, so you really didn't know much about that. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to September 4th to see what things are going to be like there on campus, where you can walk out of the frat house and walk about 100 yards and you're in the stadium. And it really is something they've not had here, and I think it's something that everybody's really looking forward to.
Yeah, Craig, you're right. The way you say it's a soft open, it was, family and friends and free appetizers and drinks kind of a thing. It was really, really small crowds and just getting used to it. But, on the bright side, I think they learned a lot about traffic flow and things like that. They had to get straight for it. So it should be a pretty good year. Obviously the Delta variant angle is popping things up a little bit. I've got some people concerned on my message board about if their seats are going to move or if they're going to have to, oh God forbid, wear masks. But that could all happen. But nevertheless, I think they're going to try to go for full capacity. And they may get it for that opener against Southern Miss.
I like to think that, the good old New Orleans Saints fans were ahead of their time wearing masks at games. So, it's really nothing new for football. It's just now making its way down to the college game.
And Mobile's a Mardi Gras town too, so people are used to wearing masks around here, although you wouldn't know it.
I'm just excited that the stadium moved so you don't have to also dodge bullets while you're going to the game and, all that. I mean, it added a sense of excitement post-game of, how quickly can we get to the car or, what's it going to be like.
Dusty, are you busting on Ladd Peoples?
I don't
have that here.
It's not well, let's be honest here. I've been going to Ladd for 30 something years. I've never had an issue there. I know they had a shooting 2 years ago, so or last year, whenever it was. So, it's probably not the best time to be defending the old place, but the issue is not, it's not in a great neighborhood. It's old. The biggest problem with that place, though, was inside the stadium. Not just the seating areas, not just the concession stands and the bathrooms, but the locker rooms had not been upgraded in 40 years. Yeah. And that was the biggest problem. And, that's a big part of why the Senior Bowl, had a lot of issues with the place too. And it's just, in addition to the benefits of being on campus, just having a new place is really nice. I mean, like I said, it gets a bad rep for some reasons, but the fact that it was not state of the art in any way. The fact that South Alabama had to bring their own video message board to their own home games and pay for it, by the way, was not really a good situation at all.
I'm looking forward to going there. Jeremy said he was going to make a road trip with me, but I never know with him. Got some exciting games. I think that opener there, Southern Miss, week 1 is going to be a good one. Always good to play Conference USA. Always good to try to get the wins there against the other G5. Your thoughts on the schedule and especially that home opener?
This year, it's Southern Miss makes it good, but then you've got a couple of the games you think would be you'd rather they be on the road because you're probably not going to win them, like Louisiana Lafayette. Dare I say even Arkansas State, even though South Alabama has a 2-game winning streak against them right now. Sorry.
I can't promise you anything.
Okay, I know. We've talked about how unpredictable your roster is, but it's still a pretty good schedule. But, man, you got to make all the hay at the front end where you got Southern Miss, Alcorn State, you got Bowling Green, maybe the worst team in FBS. Those are your first 3 games. Then you got your Texas State. All that's up front. And back, you got App State, Tennessee, Coastal Carolina, Arkansas State. It is a hard finish. So Kane Womack needs to get off to a fast start because that schedule will not forgive him later.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like Doug said, it's definitely back front-loaded to the good, back-loaded to the bad. If you can get off to a 4-2 start, that's great, or maybe even 5-1. But if you don't, you're in real trouble in terms of having a winning record, being in contention for a bowl game. South Alabama's never finished with a winning record. They've been in a couple of bowl games, but actually lost it to finish 6-7. But, yeah, it is interesting they opened with Southern Miss because if they had kept the original schedule last year, that opener would have been Grambling, which, it had been a new stadium and there would have been some excitement. But the fact that it's Southern Miss, which before South Alabama had football, Southern Miss was almost treated like a home team here. The local newspaper actually had a beat writer that covered Southern Miss football at the time. And, it's just down the road, 90 minutes if you really drive fast. Kane Womack is a Southern Miss grad. Finished his football career there. His wife is from Hattiesburg originally, so there's a lot of connections there. Will Hall is from the state of Alabama, the new coach at Southern Miss. He actually was the quarterback at North Alabama when Joel Erdman, the athletic director at South Alabama, was the AD at North Alabama. So there's all kind of connections between the two schools. I've always thought they should be in the same conference, but the fact that they're playing is really cool. I wish they would play every year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Craig, you mentioned something that I have a question for both you and Doug on it because it's kind of a high-end 30,000-foot question about South Alabama. And you were talking about how, not finishing with a winning record and that type of thing. It seems like South Alabama always is on that cusp of greatness. And when South Alabama hired Steve Campbell, I really thought that was it. That was the key. You need a guy like Steve who had a great career at UCA, knew how to win games. He was going to bring South Alabama to the upper tier of the Sun Belt and make some waves, and that just didn't quite happen. Are the pieces in place finally in Mobile for South Alabama to take that next step up?
I think it certainly seems like it. And I agree with you about Campbell. I was very much in favor of that hire. I knew him before he was at South Alabama because I'd covered him when he was a junior college coach in Mississippi. And he had won at every level. But I think the issue once they got here was that he and his staff just did not have the experience recruiting at the FBS level. They just were not able to get the kind of players that you needed to win here. Womack coming in certainly at having coached here, so he's familiar with the territory, has a lot of guys on his staff who have recruited in the state. And then, of course, he was in the Big Ten and, made all kind of waves there as a defensive coordinator and brought in some guys who have coached at very high levels, including Major Applewhite and Michael Smith, the wide receivers coach, who was the wide receivers coach at Kentucky, among other places. And the fact that they've gone out and got all these transfers, it's helped everybody, but it's helped them especially. They definitely needed an infusion of talent. I don't know, because the schedule is what it is this year, that they're, an instant contender, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were. And, I think that they're just kind of getting started on the 2022 recruiting class. I'm really interested to see how that pans out, and the fact that they've been able to use the portal They like to sell the idea that of the location. You're near the beach but not on the beach, and you're close to a lot of great high school football talent, not only in Mobile but in Florida and South Mississippi and some other places. Even New Orleans is only a couple hours away if you can tap into that market some. So, I think that there's no if they don't win, there's no excuse for it now. And again, I'm not saying that it has to be this year, but if Kane Womack doesn't get it done, I'm not sure what you do after that.
I'll piggyback on to Creq and say that I too thought Steve Campbell was going to do a great job because of the resume, and I really like Campbell. And if you talk to him, the guy absolutely knows what he's doing. There's no doubt. But I do think that the staff maybe wasn't constructed exactly right. And I also think they didn't realize the overall demands of FBS football, not just the recruiting, but in a lot of places. And I'll go back a little before Steve Campbell, though. And I think Joey Jones, if they'd have retained him, would have done pretty well. He went out and found himself a great defensive coordinator named Kane Womack. He had, because the offense was not working, he had just let go of Brian Vincent, so he obviously would have redone the offensive staff. And I think Joey had a good feel for recruiting. I thought they did a good job bringing in talented players. So I really am curious as to what might have happened had they retained him. But now with Womack in charge, I'll just tell you, I don't go around talking up South Alabama outside of South Alabama people very much, but I think they're going to be a sneaky surprise contender. I think all these polls that put them at like third or fourth in the West, I think we're looking at a team that's going to be no worse than second in the West and is going to do really, really well. Steve Campbell maybe didn't recruit that well, but he developed really well. They got some really developed fundamental guys with the transfer portal coming in. I am banking on Major Applewhite doing a good job and Corey Batoon, the defensive coordinator, doing a good job. But I think the pieces are right there for this team to come out of the gate quickly in year number one and win 7, 8, even maybe 9 games and kind of catch a lot of people by surprise.
Hey, let's not
Yes.
Let's not forget they were second in the West last year. It was just a really, really bad
4 wins. Yeah.
Low bar. Yeah, exactly.
So
I am assuming that Arkansas State's going to pull their weight this time and make it a battle for second at least.
Jeremy, that's shots across the bow as we try to build that rivalry there between South Alabama and Arkansas State. Jeremy's already on the record saying he hates the Jags, hates South Alabama. when there was a picture when he was a kid drawing the states, he would erase Alabama every year. It doesn't exist. I mean, we're doing everything we can to drive this rivalry as much as we can.
I'll drive it for you. You ready for this?
Yeah.
I am positive that South Alabama picked Kane Womack over Butch Jones. Butch Jones, I'm pretty sure, came back for 2 interviews for that job, and they decided to go with Womack. So there you go. Well, that's the shot across the net.
They definitely got Major Applewhite over Arkansas State. We know that.
We had Major Applewhite. He was
that's what I'm getting at. Hey, I'll say this. Butch Jones is a goober. I mean, 100%. Like Mr. Roper on Three's Company level. But the guy's a good football coach. I mean, if you look at what Tennessee had before him and since him, it's not even close. He's the best coach they've had since Phil Fulmer. I mean, they had 1 year of Lane Kiffin, but the guy's a good coach. I mean, he really is. And I think he's going to win there.
I think you're right, Creq. I would not have been upset if he'd have been the hire at South Alabama. I do think he is also a good coach. I think he'll do excellent in Arkansas State.
He'll be fine at Arkansas State. He's already done a good job kind of changing the culture a bit from one that was really relaxed to one that's a little more focused. But we're not here to talk about Arkansas State.
That's true.
We're here to talk about the Jags and how they're sons of bitches. I mean, I'm sorry. We're here to talk about Jags and how they're about to make that next step up. And I'm actually a little bit nervous every time I talk about the Jags, because you're right. I think they've taken 3 out of the last 4 from Arkansas State. The West, if you've already mentioned, I think you already have mentioned that the Jags did come in second last season, because the West is kind of up for grabs. You've got the Cajuns who have put their stamp on it, but it's really ripe for the taking for anybody who can kind of get into that second place. So I think Doug said that he saw 9 wins from the Jags. Are we going to – Creq, do you see the same type of success coming from the Jags this year?
I don't know about this year. Again, that schedule at the back end is so tough. And, it's funny. They played Tennessee in November in Knoxville. If they played them in September, they'd have a really good shot of winning that game.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Tennessee will probably have it a little bit more together by the end of the year. I'm thinking 7. I'm thinking they'll get win 7 games, get in a bowl game, whichever bowl game that is. But they're gonna have to get the job done early. That was a problem, for particularly last year's team. They got out, they'd get out to a decent start and just fall apart. I mean, that Tulane game just really kind of, it was so early in the season, but they were up 24-3 early in the third quarter and lost 27-24. It was just kind of a microcosm of everything they had. They didn't make good adjustments at halftime, and I think that they're going to be better coached this year. The talent level is pretty, better, better across the board just because of all the guys they brought in, but it's certainly not worse. So, yeah, I think this is a 7-win team. I'm going to have to see more, and that's assuming Jake Bentley stays healthy, which he hasn't been able to do the last couple of years.
Well,
Hey, Craig. So just to go in that real quick, the Tulane microcosm is a perfect example. He nailed that because I think the reason they couldn't hold that lead was because the offensive line was non-existent by the second half. The offense could generate nothing, and the defense played base, and that's what they did all season long. They played nothing but base. They did not try to confuse any offenses, and so they got taken advantage of in the second half of every game because by the second half, you know exactly what's coming. I think Kane Wommack's very creative with blitzing. They're not going to let offenses relax. And on offense, finally a good offensive line. At some point, we got to talk about Kareem Walker, who is probably the only hope for a responsible running attack by the Jaguars this year.
Well, all right. You were talking about the running game. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on everybody's toes.
I see what you did there, Jeremy.
Dusty, you were the one who mentioned how bad the running game was for the Jaguars these last couple of years. And now they, according to Doug, the team has brought in at least 5 transfers, new beef. Was it the offensive line that was the problem, or is it the scheme that was the problem, or is it the running backs that are the problem? And has it been fixed?
Well, look, Craig Stephenson is a former offensive lineman. So I'm going to let him take this one. Take it, Craig.
It was definitely the offensive line to me. I thought Carlos Davis was a pretty good back, and the other guys were serviceable. Jared Wilson, in particular, had some moments. If Kareem Walker is anywhere what they think he's going to be, he can be that bell cow guy. He's a guy that was highly recruited out of high school, signed with Michigan. I mean, if he's good enough to play at Michigan, again, I'm not taking shots at the Sun Belt when I say this, but if you can play at Michigan, you can play at South Alabama. The offensive line, though, is going to be really interesting because, again, I don't know about day one, but they brought in 4 guys, Antoine Lewis from Louisiana Tech, who won the starting right tackle job in the spring. Then 3 guys over the summer, James Jackson from Mississippi State, who's a center, and Terrius Gray, who's a guard from North Texas. And then a couple of tackles, Justin Stevens from Michigan State and Ja'Kai Baker, I believe is how it's pronounced, from Southeast Missouri. I would say Baker, Jackson, and Gray are all going to be starters this year. And, these are guys that have played at a reasonably high level, even though Baker's an FCS guy. I don't know much about Gordon Steele as an offensive line coach. He's the son of Kevin Steele, the longtime SEC defensive coordinator. So he's kind of an unknown quantity, but just in terms of talent, they're light years ahead of where they were last year.
Yeah, Craig's right in that I think Gordon Steele is the X factor here because we just don't know what he can do as an offensive line coach. Been an analyst at Alabama for the last 2 or 3 years. He was an offensive line coach for Murray State at one point earlier in his career. But, Murray State, I think that was during the Chris Hatcher era there when they threw the ball 80 times a game. So it's hard to know what he could do. So they gave him a bunch of talent. There's a few holdovers that might be able to play, but we're going to see now if he can mold them into something helpful. And Kareem Walker, I say the hopes on him because Jared Wilson is probably the best back remaining now from the group, and he's okay. With a good line, everyone's going to look better, but it's got to be competent enough so that any quarterback can get back there and can hand the ball off or do a quick pop pass based on the read and just be ready to make the offense go. He's got to get that time, and they weren't getting that time last year.
So really this conference this year is the top is Coastal at Louisiana Lafayette. What team out of that kind of the field outside of South Alabama do you see maybe kind of surprising somebody and jumping up into the middle or even the top part of those conference standings?
I'm going to say Texas State because I do know they were close on several games last year. They brought in another load of transfers. I think they have 1 high school guy. they're bringing in. Everybody else is a transfer or a junior college guy. I think they're close. Spavital does kind of have an air of desperation around him. He's had that since he got there, which makes me wonder. But I think they've got enough pieces in place. I think they got enough coaching. I think they're gonna jump up to be a team that's gonna be somewhere close to a winning program this year, which is going to be better than usual for them, and maybe even have a chance to go for that second place spot that South Alabama's gunning for too.
Yeah, I like that pick, Doug. And, I've said what I said about Arkansas State as well. I think they were on the rise. Georgia State was a team that really impressed me when I saw them twice last year. They came down here for the bowl game as well, in addition to playing South Alabama. I think Sean Elliott's a really good coach. Quad Brown is an excellent quarterback. I'm not sure, I haven't really examined their depth chart a lot of how many of the guys they lost, but I really thought they were moving up. And, Georgia Southern is a team that's given South Alabama fits for years, but I don't know that, there may be no group of fans more happy to see Shai Werts leave than South Alabama fans, because he terrorized them for 4 years. I mean, he was good regardless, but he killed South Alabama every time he played them.
Yeah, I think Georgia Southern fans were there's a faction as well that were ready to see Shai leave as well. We're kind of shocked that he landed at Louisville. That was a great little App State Southern rivalry, and there's not quite a fan base like those folks down there in Statesboro. I would argue there that when they saw that Vegas line of the over/under win totals at 3.5, they may have burned a couch or two. I don't know.
Hey, I will say I don't want to sell Arkansas State or Georgia State short when I was picking Texas State. That's because I am assuming you guys are going to be pretty good. So I didn't think you're not going to surprise me. But another team I would pick because I'm going to kiss the butt of the hosts. That would be ULM, which I honestly, it's not that I think they'll be bad or good. I don't know what to think about ULM. So I'm looking forward to see what happens.
My bold prediction has been double wins from last year.
There you go.
Impressive.
Terry Bowden is a really good coach and has won everywhere he's been. Now, we said that about Steve Campbell before he got in the Sun Belt, but
right.
Terry Bowden, I mean, there are very few people who can coach better on game day than Terry Bowden. I'm telling you, the guy knows what he's doing. Now, can he recruit? I don't know, but he can X and O with anybody.
Rich Rod is his OC. Come on, man. That's the storyline to me. That's what jumped out when that hire was made.
Hey, do we want to talk a little bit, since we've got the two experts here, what they think the Sun Belt's going to look like in 2 years with all this conference
restructure? Do it, man.
Hell, it might be next year.
It could be tomorrow. I don't know.
I'll take a shot at that.
Go ahead.
I think when you talk about the Sun Belt, I don't see it changing dramatically because the conference, perception-wise, right above them is Conference USA, but we all know in reality Conference USA is not above the Sun Belt. So if Conference USA gets hit and poached and they try to come after the Sun Belt, I don't think that's movement. That's not going to happen. I think the most likely scenario for a changing Sun Belt is that they manage to pick off a couple of Conference USA teams, notably somebody like Southern Miss. I know Marshall fans have expressed a lot of interest in getting out of Conference USA and being in a conference with Appalachian State. I think that is a more likely avenue as opposed to the Sun Belt getting picked off by somebody else at this point. Because I don't think if you're the AAC, you see a program in the Sun Belt that is one that you would want to get. Now you might look at a UAB. I think UAB is going to be the belle of the ball if this stuff starts happening. I think Charlotte, even though they haven't really performed that well, is in a great metro area too. I see teams like that being an AAC target if they have to backfill. I think the Sun Belt actually is going to be either very stable or in a position to actually cherry pick from Conference USA.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously the difference is that the Sun Belt is affiliated with ESPN and Conference USA is not. And, we tend to forget that it's actually a 12-team league because Little Rock and Arlington don't play football. But it's really almost a perfect setup because you have 2 teams in Texas, 2 teams in Arkansas, 2 in Louisiana, 2 in Alabama, 2 in the Carolinas, 2 in Georgia. So you would like to secure your foothold. I think Southern Miss will be a great fit for the Sun Belt just because it's just so similar to everybody else. But, I don't know that in terms of TV markets or fan bases, would add a whole lot. It's all going to be – it depends on the trickle down. I mean, if the Big 12 decides to remain the Big 12 and add teams from the AAC, then obviously everything's going to trickle down probably from to the AAC to the Sun Belt after that. But if the Big 12 just blows up and a bunch of teams go to the AAC and a bunch go to the, if Kansas were to go to the Big 10 or West Virginia to the ACC or whatever it is, then it's going to be a totally different scenario. And the funny thing is, you see some teams that don't necessarily you don't think would be Sun Belt teams maybe wind up in the Sun Belt, because you got to remember when the Big 12 was created the first time, TCU wound up in the WAC. Because they had nowhere else to go. So if either a reconstituted Big 12 or whatever it is leaves out some big name programs, it's possible you could see I'm just throwing a dart here, Kansas State or Texas Tech would wind up in the Sun Belt somehow.
Yes. See,
I don't think it's going to happen. But
what I heard Creq say was, Commissioner Thibodeau, you are correct in extending that offer to the Idaho Vandals.
Oh, God. No.
Yes.
Bring back New Mexico State.
No,
Dusty's obsession with the QB dome is
You
unhealthy.
talk about a thumb in the eye, by the way. The last game New Mexico State played in the Sun Belt, which is also the last game of Joey Jones's career, a guy from Grand Bay, Alabama, caught the game-winning touchdown. It was unbelievable.
That same year, another game that helped end Joey Jones's career is they're playing Idaho. They're beating Idaho. They look better than Idaho. A freak lightning storm comes out, delays the game for hours, and when it comes back, a bad series of calls by the refs and a couple of mistakes by South Alabama, and they lose that game in overtime, and that really set things back.
Hold on, Doug. There were 2 lightning delays in that game.
You're right.
There was one in double overtime when they were lining up to kick a field goal.
Oh my god!
It was like a 2.5 hour delay and then like a 40-minute delay. Yeah, that was one of the longest days of my life.
The lesson you can take from that then is don't have Idaho in the Sun Belt.
No,
agreed.
That means that all games are at the Kimmy Dome, but where you can't have a lightning delay.
Oh, God.
They should have paid another $50 million to get a roof on this place, is what you're saying.
Yeah, Creq, where can we find you, man?
I'm in Mobile. Is that what you're asking me? No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, where can we find you? No.
AL.com.
Yeah, where can we physically find you and shake you?
AL.com/USA is where you can find my South Alabama coverage. I'm also on Twitter at Creq Stephenson. It is CreGStephenson. And that sounds like that name spelled that way has been a burden for me, and it has, but I can get any username I want, baby.
Yeah, Craig's a good follow, so I encourage everybody to follow him. How about you, Doug? Where can we find you? And I don't mean physically, I mean digitally.
That's too bad, because I'm appearing for 3 nights at Holiday Inn. I am at jagsjungle.com, 24/7 Sports Network, 247.SouthAlabama. Find me there. I'm also on Twitter at Doug Konkel. Doug spelled the traditional way. Konkel spelled the traditional way, but people don't know it. Konkel. I will admit I'm not a great follow on Twitter. I envy you guys. I just never have the time, it seems, to sit down and think of something clever to say and put it out there. I just retweet South Alabama stuff. So that's my deal on Twitter.
As Wright Thompson famously said, the only thing that Twitter can do is get your ass fired.
I'm doing it right then.
Well,
I've lost some good jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you joining us, fellas. It was a great session. Learned a ton about South Alabama. Appreciate your time, and obviously we'll follow you here as preseason camp gets underway, and the season will be shortly thereafter.
All right, thanks for having me.
Very much.